Well, it is once again time that every prospect has been looking forward to from the start of the academy season. It is the Season 16 Simulation Soccer League Prospect Draft. Hello, everyone. I am Metafiction, and I am joined, of course, by the Commissioner Candidates.
Hello.
It's this is honestly one of my favorite times in the entire SSL season. Certainly, we've got a lot of big matches every year. It's always exciting, but what probably my favorite part, as I've said, is watching these very talented prospects being selected to the organizations with which they'll play out at least the first part of their SSL careers. It's a very exciting time for both teams and players alike. It's and especially this season, there's a lot of talent on the board to be selected. Should be very interesting to watch this play out.
Yeah, and it's a lot of movement that we've seen in the draft as well, with teams trying to make themselves or put themselves in a better position to get their player that they want. And we see on the screen right now the after the fact draft board. So we will have some trades to announce during the draft when we get to those picks that um, well gives the results that we see here. So the forum post that we see on the forum, or the draft post that we see on the forum, has the old order. So you might see some new teams in new positions here.
Indeed, there was no shortage of intrigue around this draft. A lot of movement, a lot of very, I don't wanna say tense negotiations because it's not really as tense as all that, but very interesting to see how this shook out, and it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, showing how everything did end up in the end. Of course, as we mentioned, these are the players that created during season 15. They are now being drafted to their teams and organizations with which they will start playing in season 16. In the last couple of days, we had a lot of players create, which is awesome. Those players are going to be in the season 17 class, which is the next class they will play in the academy this season. So those of you who are perhaps new to the league, uh, who are uh, who created for season 17, this is pretty much what awaits you at the end of that season, and it is going to be a very fun time for everyone involved, I think.
For sure, for sure. And the academy season, it's a bit of a lesser competition, trying to get a feeling for the league in a sense. And we may have some news on the academy, not structure per se, but how information is distributed in the academy. So the new class, you might want to look out for that information soon. Oh, sorry. I'll step away for a bit. I got food being delivered.
And in the meantime, because unfortunately I don't have the controls to the slides, I do want to mention that those of you who are being drafted today, certainly it's going to be certainly at the end of the day, this is a simulation league. I don't want to ham it up too much. You know, that is my job, granted, but this is certainly going to be a very interesting. s- I'm not really sure how else to say it. I think it's going to be pretty fun for everyone. Honestly, I'm sorry. I'm kind of floundering at the moment. But
But
yes,
pretty fun for everyone
certainly,
sounds about right.
yeah. But yes, best of luck to everyone with the teams that they end up with. And I'm sure that in a few seasons' time, we're going to see at least a few of these names much more prominently. Pretty much every class has at least a couple of breakout stars, and it's always exciting to see who they're going to be. But this class in particular, in my opinion, might be one of the most exciting that we've had since I've been in the SSL. Admittedly, that's not been very long. It's only been I created during season 11, but nevertheless, I think this is going to be a very interesting group of players to enter the league, and I cannot wait to see the kind of impact they're going to have.
Are we ready
But
for the first pick, maybe?
Indeed, I believe I am ready when you are.
So this past week, we've had the managers selecting their players. We've had an offline draft, and today's live stream is essentially just us presenting it to the rest of the league, and especially to the new draftees, to the new rookies. The first overall pick was given to União Sao Paulo. Given, maybe not a not a good word for that, because the draft pick order is defined by the reverse standings of last season. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see it, União Sao Paulo ended up in 8th place in the major leagues last season. But as a benefit, they get to pick first. And with their selection, they have picked Beakley Eilish, the user Kari.
Well, Candace, I really have seen everything now. We've got a chicken in the league. We've had a duck create, and now we've got a goose in the SSL. I don't know where all these birds are coming from, but yeah, I mean, it's very. I don't know. This is a weird one, but
Something in the water,
but I
probably.
it must be. It must be. I think it is a very good pick for União Sao Paulo, though. Obviously, first overall, they had their pick of the entire class, and I think they did a fairly good job here. Eilish is a fairly well-rounded defender, at least in terms of initial attribute distribution. The thing that really sticks out with Eilish is, as of right now, they currently have 161 TPE available. Once the next round of updates goes through, so this player could very well essentially build into whatever Unio needs them to be. As things stand, though, currently, you see there on the screen the top attributes there: 11 pace, strength, and heading. A good start there. Seems to be built to be more of a ball playing defender, uh, with lots of potential, lots of room to grow. So, but again, very well rounded to start out. My only real concern is the lack of acceleration, which is only at 5, which is the base value that all attributes start at. So that could certainly stand to be increased. Not quite as important for central defenders, but certainly in a league where many players are at the upper end of pace in the 18, 19, 20 range. You want all the speed you can get if you're going to defend against that. So, apart from that, there's again a lot of potential here, a lot of untapped ability here. I think once that TP is applied, Eilish is going to be more than worthy of the number one overall pick.
And as Kari herself in the chat says, I don't need to be fast, I can fly. I
You
mean,
know what? That's a
sure.
fair counterpoint.
Yep. Yep. So we got the happy chicken or furious chicken. Happy chicken is the user. And now we got a goose loose in the central defense. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if you're going to have any bird in defense, it would be a goose. Those things are terrifying.
That is true. That is true. And we also see the academy statistics here on the left-hand side with 15 appearances, the full academy season for Eilish, with an average rating of 6.85. Usually we talk about an average rating of around 7 being very good or decent. An average rating of above 6 is essentially just a positive rating. Not a lot of goals, but still 2 assists as a defender, which is very interesting. I don't know. I can't remember exactly which scenarios those assists came from, but Eilish was paired up with another draftee, Jean Girard, whose user is Gordon Bombay, an assistant manager in Reykjavik, which means that that player went automatically to Reykjavik. And I believe
Yeah,
Girard had a couple of goals from corners, so maybe Eilish was a bit um, helped out that part of the team a bit, maybe.
and certainly set pieces are very important in the modern SSL. I say modern in the last few seasons at least, but yeah, that anytime you can get a player that is going to contribute in a set piece situation, that is an additional bonus, I think. And also, I'd like to point out 73, excuse me, defensive actions. This is a player that will get into the thick of the defensive actions, into the in defensive play, and that is very important for a central defender. I think, again, very strong pick by Sao Paulo here. And certainly they needed a strong draft after last season's performance, where they managed to go the entire season without claiming a single point. They lost all 14 of their matches. So they're certainly a bit of a rebuilding project there in Brazil, but based on this first pick, I think they're off to a strong start.
The future looks bright.
Indeed.
And with that, we can move on to the second overall pick coming from CF Catalunya. And they have selected Ilya Prusikin, the user Orbiting Death, a recurring user or a recreate user. What do you call it?
Uh, I think recreate is the correct
Yeah.
term. But yes, Orbiting Death previously had Kuai Liang, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Or Liang Kuai. I
Um,
can't remember which order of those names.
I do get it confused
Yeah.
myself, to be honest. I should be better about that. But nevertheless, this is a user with plenty of SSL experience, and Kuai Liang, as I've mentioned previously, one of the top assist makers in the SSL. In fact, the record holder, I think. We look at Ilya Pruskin, and the first thing that jumps out is that 18 pace. That is absolutely blazing for a draftee. So, and certainly in a league like this that is so focused on speed, that is going to be a huge asset right out of the gate. They'll be looking to bomb up the flank and ping in crosses to central their central attackers with that 14 crossing, and they have the dribbling to do it too with 13. Certain acceleration's also fairly good at 12, so that's certainly worth keeping in mind. 13 passing. The main drawback that I can tell is a lack of teamwork and vision ratings. Teamwork is currently rated as 7, vision at a 6. So, I mean, certainly it's less of an issue when you're trying to cross from the wings, but I do question that sort of I do question that sort of team effort, team vision status at the moment. But as with all of these draftees, there's plenty of room to build that up. And certainly, I think this is a very good pick for a team that would look to attack from the wings and try to force balls into that central position from out wide.
Yeah, Catalonia has had a history of using speedy wingbacks. I believe Juha Järvinen was one of the long-term left defenders of Catalonia. So Prusikin is definitely coming into a team that has some experience with this type of player, and with the pace, like you mentioned, and the crossing and dribbling, definitely going to be looking very scary, maybe for Seoul now in the first couple of seasons, and for Catalonia in the seasons to come. Another teammate of Eilish, so another Victoria Falls player from the academy, stepping in here at second overall. So it seems like the defenders of Victoria Falls are in high demand from the teams in the SSL.
Indeed, and you look at those academy stats, 3 assists is certainly a respectable return, 7.08 average rating, as you were mentioning, and that's only from 13 appearances. There are 16 academy matches in a season, I believe. So
15,
even though 15, excuse
yes.
me, I apologize. But yes, even though they didn't quite have a full season, that's still a fairly solid return from the games that were played. And again, we also have, as far as the traits go, you see down there toward the bottom, getting forward whenever possible is very important for a wingback to have. So again, this is a player with the tools to succeed, and I think the environment of Catalonia Soul is a very good place for those talents to really shine.
So two defenders picked number 1 and number 2. That seems to be the trend usually from what we've seen in the past couple of drafts, that defenders go early or often in the first round here. At 3rd overall with the next pick, we have Hollywood FC. Hollywood as well coming in into this draft with a bit fewer picks than last season. Or was it the season before they picked like an entire team with like 11 or 12 picks, I think. So they're definitely in a rebuild, and this 3rd overall pick is probably going to be a player that will help them along the way. And at 3 overall, we have another defender coming off the board. Alexandros Mograin, the user Slicer user.
Well, again, this is another one of those players that has a lot of TPE banked, so it's a little hard to tell exactly what they will turn into. But with that said, this does seem to be perhaps a slightly more defensively balanced wingback as than you would usually see. The marking of 11 there and the tackling, the fact that was one of the main uh, focuses of investment, along with marking opponent tightly and playing no through balls, that does tell to me this is a more defensively based wingback. And I think that is very, very useful for the system that Hollywood runs. I think ultimately it's a little unorthodox for a wingback, but I don't think anybody is complaining. I think it could work very well, certainly. This not me. The thing is that not taking too much playing no through balls means that they probably won't take too many risks, which, while that is good from a defensive standpoint, can sort of make things a little slower in the build up. And in a game where players can jump onto the ball in a microseconds notice, that little extra hesitation might be a bit of a liability in certain cases. But overall, you cannot complain about defensive nous, and McGrain has it in spades.
And we also, defensive build, but seemingly a very offensive player. He's in the academy in the 15 games for Atletico Medellin. Mograin scored actually a goal and assisted in 5. So even though plays no through balls and maybe a bit more defensive build, the player has been offensively present and contributed to a couple of chances, 9 in total.
That is certainly true as well, and obviously not to denigrate McGrain's contributions in the attack, because that is ultimately we are talking about a wingback. Of course, they will be getting forward and assisting in those chances. Certainly worth pointing out. This is very much a dual threat player. I for one am very excited to see how this blend of skills, and especially once that TPE is applied, how that blend of skills translates to the SSL. We do know that Hollywood likes to play new draftees in the majors team right away rather than having them start out in the minors in a lot of cases. In fact, most of their majors team at Hollywood, I believe, was drafted within the last 2 or 3 seasons. So, I think McGrain has a very good chance at blending into this team to that Hollywood team very well straight away. Or if they want to season McGrain in Capstat as well, I think that would be honestly, either one, I think, would be beneficial for McGrain. I think they're going to do very well in this league.
Definitely. And we do have, like you mentioned, Hollywood tends to use a lot of their younger players at Hollywood, but I think they might have too many players being active right now, which is a luxury resource to have. So, um,
It's a
definitely
very good problem to have.
yes, exactly, very good problem to have. So we'll see where Mograin will end up, but Hollywood will definitely see a good addition in the seasons to come. At 4 overall, yeah, we're at 4 overall, so halfway through the first round, kind of at the end of the first half of the first round. We have Tokyo. So Tokyo ended up in what is it, fifth in the major league?
Fifth
Like I
place,
said,
yes.
yeah, reverse standings, and they have selected from Atletico Medellin Fernand Rivest, or Fernand Rivet if it's French, because the user is Frenchy.
Well, full disclosure at the top, I am actually one of the assistant managers at Tokyo, so certainly and so I will do my best to present this free of bias, but I figured if anybody doesn't know, I figured it was worth mentioning. With that said, Tokyo certainly needed a goalkeeper with Dobby Rube inactive and being subject to regression, and they got one at number 4. And there were 3 goalkeepers in this class. Revest is, in fact, the one with the lowest current TPE. However, certainly you can't fault Tokyo for picking Revest. Ultimately, very good reflexes, very strong aerial reach, is going to be very good at stopping shots. Certainly, you could make the argument that either one of the other goalkeepers in this draft would have been a might have been a better fit, but with that said, there is no complaint here from the Tokyo camp when drafting very much based on need and getting very good value for it. They had their pick of goalkeepers and they got the player they wanted.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of goalkeepers, like you mentioned, Dobby Rue being inactive, but we've also seen a lot of goalkeepers retiring in the past 2 seasons, I think, if I remember correctly. So we do have a couple of spaces and a couple of teams that might need to refresh their um, goalkeeping situation a bit.
Indeed, goalkeepers are in fairly high demand, and certainly and if I'm not mistaken, past drafts usually only have 1, maybe 2 goalkeepers
Yeah,
in their class, so for there to be 3 in this draft is very fortuitous for the teams that need goalkeepers either presently or in the near future. Certainly,
def.
there is a little bit of a sorry, I apologize, I talked over you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there is a bit of a concern on the physical end. Apart from raising agility to 10, the physical attributes have not been touched for Revest. Currently, again, not quite as important are pace and acceleration for goalkeepers, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And only 5 jumping reach it might not goalkeepers, I believe their aerial ability is determined by their aerial reach attribute,
Correct.
so that
Yes.
might not be as much of a concern, but certainly 5 strength might be cause for worry, might be muscled off the ball a little more easily. But other than that, it's certainly going to be very interesting to see whether Revest immediately plugs in at Tokyo or takes a season or 2 in Cairo first. It ultimately depends on how great the need is in Tokyo for a shot stopper.
The academy stats on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, we don't have that much detailed stats for goalkeepers in these draft cards. It's something that I need to work on, but my mind has been elsewhere the past couple of months with the portal and everything. So unfortunately, we can't really see how Rivest has performed. But I
Actually,
believe. Oh, maybe you have
believe it or
that.
not, I have actually just pulled that up here.
Oh, nice.
So we're looking at Fernand Revest, who made 14 appearances, as you can see. Let's see, a save percentage of 61.86, which is the lowest of the 3 goalkeepers eligible for the draft today. However, it did keep a clean sheet and forced 3 draws out of with a record of 5 and 6 and 3. So certainly room for growth here, but an X save percentage of 84 suggests perhaps being a little bit unlucky in some of those goals conceded. So I think in the Tokyo Cairo environment, Revest has a very good chance to thrive despite those numbers.
And being a goalkeeper in the academy isn't the easiest place to be. Usually, the defense is either 350 inactive players or rookies that maybe aren't as structured in their defensive play as you would see in the minors and major leagues. So uh, maybe not take those statistics as the ground truth, so to speak. We can move on to 5th overall, and here we have CA Buenos Aires. And with their 5th overall selection, they will pick from Stockholms Idrottsklubb, Sterling Scott, the user Agent Smith.
Well, as somebody who's been on the sim team for the last few seasons, Agent Smith is a fairly well-established league presence, has recreated, was formerly the goalkeeper Scott Sterling, and now has recreated at the other end of the pitch. Certainly Sterling Scott, obviously very fast to start out, and that 18 finishing certainly catches the eye. The only problem is that a lot of other attributes are a little bit lacking, especially in the technical sense, but also in a bit, also especially in the mental. The physical stats certainly we see 18 pace, 16 acceleration, but the problem is that without the technical and mental stats to back it up, the striker may well finish well, but might struggle to find space. That said, with places shots and first time shots, the real question is i- is whether they can stop Scott from finishing once he does get into those spots. And certainly by the academy stats, this question would be probably not.
Yeah.
20 goals from 15 appearances, and honestly, this is going to be a very exciting player. And once Scott has actually been able to develop a little bit more, could very well start setting some records. I'll stake that now. I think this player could very well be one of the top scorers of all time if he pans out.
I mean, if the pace continues with about, what is it, 1 and 33 goals per game, that's good.
That's a
Yeah,
phenomenal average, I think.
definitely,
And
definitely.
an average rating of 7.78 as well. This is Sterling Scott is a weapon, and Buenos Aires have gotten a very good pick here.
The average rating though, it's inflated a bit for strikers. The average rating tends to be around 8, 9, 10 if you score a lot of goals. Even though you might say that another player on the team has had a better overall game, maybe. So the average rating is a bit inflated here, but over 7 is not something to be sneezed at. Is that how the saying goes?
That's you pretty much got it in one. It is nothing to sneeze at indeed.
So Sterling Scott coming into Buenos Aires with as a striker here to join and probably score some goals in both Athens and Buenos Aires in the seasons to come. With 6 overall, we have Hollywood back on the board. I believe this was a trade they made with Romana earlier in the season because this is was usually or originally AC Romana's pick. I believe this was a trade for Jürgen Müller that went to Romana earlier in the season.
I
So with
believe that's correct.
yeah, so with 6 overall, Hollywood selects from Victoria Falls, Duncan Wallerson, the user Jexter.
Well, again, this is the second of the three goalkeepers on the board, and of the three, this goalkeeper Walrusen appears to me to be the purest shot stopper available. You look there at the stats: 14 agility, 13 position, 12 concentration. But what's not shown, which is a little odd, is 15 aerial reach and 14 reflexes. So Walrusen is going to be on shots pretty much instantly, or at least as close as humanly possible. Very. I have actually talked to Jexter about what they're hoping to build, and Walrusen, they have said, is indeed intended to be more of a shot-stopping, stay-at-home kind of goalkeeper. Certainly a certainly a very strong pick here by Hollywood. Uh, they did have a hole at goalkeeper that they needed to fill with their current keeper, I believe Dexter Hall. Still has some tread on the tires, but nothing wrong with securing a long-term succession plan here. And as plans go, I don't think he can do much better.
I need to unmute my mic if you want to hear me. Yes, once again we see the academy stats here being a bit missing or a bit lacking for goalkeepers. The brackets, or we forgot to mention that the goals and assists has one number before and one number within parentheses. The number that is outside of the parentheses is the actual goals and the actual assists that the player has um, performed or player has completed. Whereas the number inside of the parentheses is the expected number of goals and the expected number of assists. So as a goalkeeper here, Wallerson actually has 0.1 expected assists, which is very interesting because that means that he or they were um, um, uh, performing, or they were participating in the offensive plays of Victoria Falls. Or this might just be a long ball from the goalkeeper coming into a striker that made a shot from maybe a bit far out with that such a low expected value.
Well, as any fan of English soccer will tell you, pre-2000s, the long ball is a legitimate strategy. Certainly, though, as far as academy stats go, I do have them here, and the thing that jumps out to me is 4 clean sheets. The only other goalkeeper in this class to keep a clean sheet was Rivest, who went at number 4 overall to Tokyo. So, eh, Wallerson also leads in save percentage among the academy goalkeepers with 72.55 out of an X save of 81%. So, absolutely going to be absolutely showing that they have the chops here to contribute in goal at a very high level, and Hollywood will almost certainly appreciate that right from the start. So, again, a very solid pick here for Hollywood. They have both the short and the long-term future in mind here, I think.
And those expected save percentages, as you mentioned, is essentially the reverse of the expected goals, the expected assists that you see for outfield players. So essentially, how many saves did the goalkeeper, or was the goalkeeper expected to save, given the position of the shots that they received? So if the expected save percentage is higher than their actual save percentage, you mentioned with Revest earlier, that usually means that they might be unlucky, or maybe has, yeah, we're expected to save more shots than they actually did. But then again, the academy is a league of its own in the sense for goalkeepers, so you might not want to take that as the ground truth when you talk about the projections for the major or minor leagues.
Especially when you've got finishers around like Sterling Scott.
Yes, yes, definitely. But the 4 clean sheets definitely shows a bigger picture for Walruson's performance in the academy. We have a trade to announce now for 7 overall. And by this, I mean that the 7 overall originally wasn't owned by União Sao Paulo, and there was a trade occurring during the draft that sent that pick to União Sao Paulo. And this trade involved Reykjavik, who was the second overall in the major leagues last season and owned 7 overall. And they sent that seventh overall pick alongside a 19th overall pick to União Sao Paulo for the 9th overall pick, União Sao Paulo's second rounder, and the 15th overall pick, actually Reykjavik's original second rounder. So Reykjavik got back their second round pick in this trade. So 4 picks changing hands here, 7 plus 19 for 9 and 15.
I think this is a very strong move here by União Sao Paulo to trade back into the first round in order to get, again, a fairly wide pool of players to pick from, again, for their second pick. Certainly going to need a lot of rebuilding after last season. I believe the wrong trade is on the screen now,
Yep,
unfortunately.
sorry.
Spoilers, sorry. But yes, I think Unio doing very well to trade back in the first round, and it's going to be very interesting to see uh, how these new rookies can contribute to turning their fortunes around. Hopefully,
So União Sao Paulo is on the board with 7th overall pick, and they select from Atletico Medellin. Bear with me now. Zikwarndalethron Velstraisen Smith. Good luck, meta fiction, on the commentating later in the season. The user
I'm
Jason
already looking
Kranz.
forward to it. I am already looking forward to it and dreading it. But yes, this is a very strong pick for União Sao Paulo. Uh, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. Zykorn Delathron Velstrazen Smith. Hopefully that was close. I'm going to start calling them ZVS for the time being, and I hope that's okay. Nevertheless, ZVS has all the makings of a strong uh, box threat, certainly with with strong pace and finishing and composure. Can get into those positions and slot home opportunities with a cool head. Uh, Certainly 13 dribbling and 12 first touch, 13 passing as well. They can either take the shot themselves or find someone else who's in a better position. Going to be very important for that Unio attack. One not really that strong last season, so they're hoping certainly that ZVS can provide a very important spark uh, in that attack. And I think this player is a player whose name we will be saying for many years, many seasons to come. Unfortunately for me,
At least try to say their name.
I did try it. I
Yeah.
did try it. If you heard, I
You did better than me, at
listen.
least. You
Listen,
mentioned
needs
their
must.
offensive prowess. They are created as a central attacking midfielder, but I think that they built their player a bit more like a what is it called, a shadow striker, the role that central attacking midfielders has in FM, which essentially is just a late striker coming into the box of the opposition. And you can really see that in the statistics with 8 goals on 15 appearances, 3 assists, and 4 chances created in total. So definitely participating in the offensive actions of Atletico. And as the manager of Sao Paulo now realized, he just drafted another central attacking midfielder. So definitely going to join a very offensive-minded team here with Velstrazen Smith.
Well, certainly it's not I would say it's still a fairly solid pick, position notwithstanding. I mean, regardless of position, this is the sort of player. Velstrazen Smith is sort of the player that you would build an attack around, I think. So, regardless of whether it's doubling up on a position, I think it's very much worth bringing in ZVS to this rebuilding effort. And as I said, hoping to provide a little spark to get that Sao Paulo engine running in the attacking third.
Is it ZVS or ZVS?
You
Fight
know,
fight between Canada and the US and USA right now.
the funny thing is, I actually do say "Z" a lot of the time
Oh,
instead,
really?
and yet I am American. So, uh, chat, comments, this one's on you. This one's up to you. Fight it out if you want.
And we're at the last pick of the first round. We have the league champions of last year's Major League, Schwarzwälder Fußballverein, picking up their player in the first round here at 8 overall. And they select from Victoria Falls Eagles, Spike Shaftwell, the user Figgy.
SFV unbeaten last season and have made a very strong statement pick here. Shaftwell is one of those players that will dive into a tackle on the wing and distribute the ball that they've won pretty much instantly. Very strong passing, obviously, and tackling. Going to be crunching into wingers and defenders, just generally being a menace out on that right wing, and has the teamwork and the work rate to get the ball up the pitch, going to be very important on the counter. The big concern that I have is despite all of these stats, they do have they have not invested in acceleration or pace, and as we all know, that is an extremely important element in today's game. So they certainly have the tools in terms of instincts and ability, but they're going to need to work on. They're going to need to get into the gym, do some quickness training because they might get left behind. But apart from that, certainly no complaints about this pick. I think certainly going to help with that counterattacking, with that build up.
And you mentioned the lack of speed of pace. I mean, as an academy player, you get a lot of TPE during the first maybe 2 or 3 seasons. Training camp being worth like 40 TPE during those seasons. So you definitely have the room to improve those maybe lower skills, even after this draft, even after this the first academy season. So I wouldn't worry too much if a player has these low values because that could easily be improved during the first couple of weeks, essentially, with the new team.
Absolutely. Any judgments that I make on a player's attribute layout, certainly that's not final because there is plenty of room for these players to grow, potentially in ways that are completely unexpected. This is essen this is essentially there is nowhere to go but up for any of these players, and certainly a weakness today could be a huge strength in a few seasons' time. So even though they are extremely low in acceleration and pace, there's still plenty of time and plenty of TPE to remedy that situation.
For sure, and even though maybe that was the pace that didn't contribute to that many goals, but 7 assists in 15 appearances for Victoria Falls here is a very good outing, and it I believe the chances created, the CHA here stat is essentially how many passes you made that turned into goal scoring opportunities. And it looked like all of the chances that were in dangerous areas actually resulted in a goal. So Shotwell seems to be a very good distributor of the ball uh, to a striker or to another teammate, or to place them in a position that where they can actually score. So the passing 18, the attribute there seems to have worked really well in the academy.
Indeed, even though the goal scorers are the ones that ultimately get the headlines, 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't be possible without that final ball in. So, certainly a very strong distributor, going to be very important for the Black Forest attack in the seasons to come, and I, for one, cannot wait to see what kind of nonsense they orchestrate on that right wing. And I say nonsense in a good way, to be clear. Yeah, I know that's kind of it can go either way, but this is good nonsense.
Yeah.
It's gonna be ridiculous to watch, and I am here for it.
And that concludes the first round. We see a couple of defenders, three if I'm counting correctly. We have two goalkeepers off the board, and one striker and two midfielders. So maybe we can put up, or if all of those players went to one team, we can put up quite a good selection of players. But we will move into the second round with the 9th overall pick, and we have Reykjavik United coming back in, originally owned by União Sao Paulo. We mentioned that in the trade before. Sao Paulo trading into 9, and Reykjavik get into 7. Sorry, and Reykjavik getting 9 overall back. And with the 9th overall selection, the Reykjavik United organization selects from Atletico Medellin Santos Neymarinho, the user Solja or 5olja. I'm guessing that's supposed to be an S when you pronounce it.
Well, Neymarinho, if I'm not mistaken, is the Class TPE leader, just barely, and certainly a lot of people had them picked to go a little higher, but nonetheless, I think they found themselves in a very good position at Reykjavik United, North Shore United. That 16 pace is very strong, coupled with 15 acceleration, and 15 dribbling is important for a winger, being able to get past defenders trying to take the ball away on the wing. Uh, Very quick with the ball, very good instincts mentally. The main issue with their current build is a lack of teamwork and work rate in the attributes. Work rate is very important on the wings. There's a lot of running, a lot of having to navigate your way around the defense. I worry that a low work rate coupled with that low teamwork might result in some squandered chances early on. However, once there's time to develop that, I think Neymarinho could go very far, and that's evidenced by 6 goals and 6 assists in the academy. Certainly nothing to sneeze at, and very much a good pick here by Reykjavik.
Who needs teamwork when you can try tricks? I think that's a very interesting trait to have, especially for a winger, to be able to get past the defender in interesting ways, in imaginative ways. We haven't seen that trait being used that much in the different players we have. So I really enjoy that Neymarinho has that trait on a player from Brazil, especially.
It is a very exciting trait. The concern that I have is that it relies a lot on flair, if memory serves, and
Yes.
currently Neymarinho's flair is at a 10, which is certainly not bad. It is very middle of the road, but I would like to see that a little higher to get the most out of that trait that they could. But otherwise, this is a very exciting build, and I'm very excited to see what Neymarinho can do on the pitch against major or minor league opposition.
As a defender myself, I would not want to face Neymarinho on the pitch.
I am
Uh,
certainly very glad that he is going to be on the opposite side of the pitch from me.
oh,
He'll be
right,
attacking the
you're a
right
defender
defender.
too, right? Yes,
Yes, a left back
yes.
specifically. So thankfully, not on my side of the field. He'll be one of my teammates' problem.
Watch Reykjavik putting him on the right side just to spite you.
Admittedly, that would be fun. Nevertheless, I mean, as far as I can tell, he can play out on the right, so I might have spoken too soon. But nevertheless, again, strong pick by Reykjavik. I think that's pretty much the ideal situation for a player of Neymarinho's caliber. Words.
Moving on to 10th overall, we have Buenos Aires with their second selection in this season's prospect draft, acquired from Catalonia earlier during last season's prospect draft, if I remember correctly. And at 10 overall, Buenos Aires selects another player from Stockholm's idrottsklubb, Bérangère Amandine Bruer Estranger. The user spoils.
That was a solid pronunciation job. That's much better than I could have done.
Good luck trying to say that quickly in the game.
This class is full of names that are going to tie my tongue into knots, and I love it. But yes, Bérangère Amandine Bruer Estranger is certainly going to be a very important player in this defense for Buenos Aires in the seasons to come. Fairly solidly all around build, very good technically, especially marking, heading, and tackling there, as you see. Diving into tackles will mean they take a lot of risks, which can sometimes be the difference in whether a chance is created or not. You also see there the uncommon trait winds up opponents, which certainly is not a trait that we see all that often, but we do see it about once every season. Uh, Going to be interesting to see if that can. I think it might have a little more effect in a defensive position, especially with that hard tackling instinct. Going to be interesting to see if they can draw cards from attackers using that trait. Uh, the They also have a strong mental and physical game, as I say, fairly well built all around. The pace of 10 is a little low, and acceleration hasn't really been invested in at all. So I do worry that they might be beaten for pace early on. But again, as I've said before, plenty of room to address that in the coming seasons with the veritable glut of TPE that is going to be available. But certainly mentally and technically, uh,
Nope.
Beranger. Sorry.
There we go.
There we go. Bruer Estrangin is going to be fairly well set up for success here.
And defense is certainly something that Buenos Aires is looking for, considering both Henrik Lind and Che Guevara, the two current central defenders in Buenos Aires, is they are both very old. I think going below 600 TP or something like that after this season's regression. Definitely a strong need for Buenos Aires long term.
Indeed, and after a season or two of development, Bruer Estrangin should very easily slot into that Buenos Aires back line. So very much a solid pick here by Buenos Aires. It addresses a position of need and a very good player to boot.
We have another trade to announce. Well, you see the results in the draft board, but we also saw that trade actually being spoiled a bit earlier. For 11th overall, the current or the original owners, Hollywood, made a trade with Schwarzwälder, sending their second round pick, the 11th overall pick, for Schwarzwälder's 16th overall pick in this season's draft and their second round pick in next season's draft. So 1 second for 2 seconds, essentially swapping 11 for 16 plus something else.
Well, SFV trading up in the second round, they have their eye on somebody, and they want to make sure that they can get to them. Certainly a decent return for Hollywood. They get more picks, which they do tend to appreciate. So I think this is a pretty fair trade for both teams involved. SFV getting to pick just a few spots earlier as they need. Hollywood keep a second rounder and gain an extra one for next season. So cannot complain about this pick for either team. About this trade rather.
So Schwarzwälder trades up for 11th overall, and with that 11th overall selection, I'm using shortcuts and that moves the wrong screens. And with that 11th overall selection, they select from Stockholm's idrottsklubb William Williams, the user Xotzin or Niktox Rivers.
Well, this is the final goalkeeper on the board, and it makes sense for SFV to come up and trade up to make this pick. They have their current goalkeeper, Munkoy Saran is in the prime of their career, but they didn't really have a succession plan established. So this is going to lock down that goal for many seasons to come. Uh, Williams with very strong aerial reach and reflexes from what I'm seeing. 16 aerial reach, 14 reflexes. Very well technically versed as a goalkeeper. So very much very well trained in the academy. And also quite good at one-on-ones with a 14 in that rating as well. So we see a lot in the SSL where forwards will break past the defensive line and be one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and having a little extra security in that sort of situation is absolutely invaluable. The only real concern is the lack of mental investment. There's certainly some effort made to increase composure as well as anticipation and concentration, but apart from that, is lacking a little bit in that department at the moment. So that will most likely be a focus of a focus of their early training is to sort of instill that mentality of making sure that they are in fact set to they are in the right mind space for this league. But certainly as things stand, very technically gifted. I think it's a very justifiable move to move up to make sure that you secure a goalkeeper like this for the long term.
And it does seem like you mentioned that the goalkeeper attributes aren't properly parsed or properly scraped for the strength shown here on the screen. So good on you to take those up. The aerial reach, as you mentioned, being very high for a goalkeeper. And we also see here the Williams coming into the academy a bit later in the season, only appearing in 9 matches compared to the full season of 15. But still average rating of a 6.84. And if I remember correctly, Stockholm won the academy, or at least, yeah, I think they did. If my mind doesn't fail me. And we also saw mentioned earlier about goalkeepers with high expected goals or high expected assists being far and few between. But here we have a goalkeeper who actually has 0.16 in expected goals and almost one or more than one expected assists. I'm not sure how that happened, but it's a goalie here that seems to be very participating very much in the offense of at least Stockholm. Maybe not Montreal or Schwarzwälder, but they seem to do that well as well.
Honestly, any chance that we get of a goalkeeper scoring a goal is a chance I will gladly relish. I have not had the fortune to commentate one yet, but I'm sure that day is coming, and when it does, there will be much rejoicing. You can have no doubt of that. As far as statistics from this academy season, Williams' save percentage was second among the three goalkeepers drafted today, with a save percentage of 68.18. Had the highest X save percentage of 85, for what that's worth as well. Did not keep any clean sheets, but did have a record of 3, 4, and 1. But they did concede the fewest goals of any of the goalkeepers with 14. And even though that was because they joined midway through the season, if you combine with the other goalkeeper that uh, Stockholm employed, Zero Axel, they still conceded the fewest goals total, with 26 in total compared to Walruson's 28. So certainly not certainly a very strong, very imperious presence in goal is Williams. And again, I think it's a good pick by Schwartzwalder to secure their long-term goalkeeper. I don't. I think I would assume Saran Setral is still the man for the time being, but at least once regression does start to hit and really start to take its toll, they are going to be set, and they won't have to scramble for any sort for a potential replacement. So very smart thinking by the SFV management team.
We have a trade to announce for the next pick as well, as you might have been spoiled there as well, with Hollywood wanting to trade into the second round or trading up in the second round. Tokyo is the original owner of the 12th overall pick, and Tokyo sends that pick to Hollywood for 14th overall and 16th overall, and as well as two players, Princess Shangshan and David Doug. So another trade with essentially a second for 2 seconds, with some fillers here. With I believe those two are inactive players.
They are indeed, and this is on paper a very big haul to be giving for a to move up 2 spaces in the second round, but with the 2 players being inactive, this essentially boils down to Tokyo trading down 2 spaces and being paid an additional second round pick to do so. In fact, that is the 16 overall that I believe Hollywood just got from Black Forest just a moment ago. So, certainly some very rapid pick swapping here, but I it does good things for both teams. It gives Tokyo some extra in and albeit inactive, but nevertheless, some extra reinforcements for both either themselves or for Cairo, and it also gives them 2 picks where they once had 1, even if a little bit further back. So Hollywood needed the 12th overall. They were prepared to pay whatever they needed to, and I think that's about that ultimately shakes out to a fair trade, even though it does look very lopsided.
Yeah, it does. You have to be you have to remember as well as a viewer that the Tokyo has seen a lot of retirements in their roster, and they need to field two teams, both in the major and minor leagues. So probably that's why Shangshan and David Doug is becoming a part of this, and Hollywood has a lot of players. Like we mentioned before, they drafted an entire team essentially in the past two drafts. So they have a couple more players um, to spare essentially. So with the 12th overall pick that now Hollywood owns, they select from Stockholm's Idrottsklubb Evan Hunt, the user Matty Ice.
Well, certainly a very I will never criticize a good solid defensive midfielder. Might be one of my favorite positions on the soccer field or pitch. This player is extremely well-rounded, competent in just about every area possible. Uh, most attributes at least a 10. We see there obviously on the screen 12 acceleration, 12 pace, 12 work rate, and dictates tempo is a very important trait for a defensive midfielder to have. So certainly fairly well balanced in just about everything, though that does kind of come at the price of not really having one thing that they excel at. They don't really have a particular specialty, a unique selling point. But that is still a fairly good thing because ultimately you can essentially plug this player into just about any tactic and they will perform at least at a competent level. And there's plenty of room, as we've said, in the coming seasons for specialization as they need. So Hollywood can essentially gotten a player that's very good on as a baseline and can grow into whatever they need, which is a flexibility that should not be taken for granted. Uh, so certainly smart business, I think, by Hollywood, and 5 assists in academy play is definitely worth mentioning as well. So, I think overall a pretty interesting pick here.
Yeah, one of the couple of central defensive midfielders. Like you said, it's a position that I as well enjoy very much. That was the intent of my player when I started, but that was not to be. So Hunt here is definitely coming in as a player who, or as a in a position where I think a lot of teams use, but maybe not have had the specific player in mind to succeed in those positions. And the build with essentially 12s and everything, it's an open book. You can write anything with that type of current build.
And sometimes versatility is itself a strength as much as it is a weakness. So, uh, yeah, certainly going to be very interesting to see how Hollywood shapes Hunt's development here. Uh, Going to be very exciting, and certainly defensive midfielders, not the flashiest of positions. It's not the most, and certainly not the most glamorous, but it's a vital part of any midfield whenever it's included. So certainly don't take this position or this player for granted. Could be very, very important in the seasons to come.
We have yet another trade, the third pick in a row, where we announce a trade before it. 13th overall, originally owned by Buenos Aires, has been sent to União Sao Paulo in together with the third round pick of season 17 from Buenos Aires in exchange for União Sao Paulo's third round pick this draft, so swapping 13th overall with 17th overall, and the player Neslihan Genkal, left attacking midfielder, coming back to Buenos Aires. A player that Buenos Aires needed in terms of activity on that position. So a player need in terms of the return coming back to Buenos Aires, apart from just the pick.
Indeed, it's another one of those trades that really does fill a need for both sides. And you thought we were joking when we said there was a lot of intrigue in this draft. This is trade number 4, and we are not done yet. I promise you. But yeah, Sao Paulo trading up once again to get back into the second round. They needed a lot of help, and they are getting it with the number of picks that they are accumulating here. So we're about to find out who they picked with that selection. And but overall, trade wise, I think again this benefits both sides. Nothing really to say.
So with the 13th overall selection, União Sao Paulo selects from Stockholms Idrottsklubb Olivier Victoria, the user Wildfire Micro.
Well, we see there a right midfielder. They're going to be a fairly solid offensive presence on the wing, as far as we can tell. 14 agility, but also 14 anticipation and decisions, such underrated attributes. But when you're out on the wing, you need to make snap decisions. That's a very strong base to work from, for sure. Let's also point out the 13 vision, which is going to help with passing as well as 13 dribbling. So again, this just boosts what I'm saying. Uh, Going to be very good out on the wing. They're very agile with an agility of 14 to complement all of this. And I think, and it really does benefit when you have a player on the wing that you can trust to make very good decisions. As I've said, it's a very it's a game of centimeters essentially, and well, inches, but centimeters.
Centimeters.
Measurement isn't me Measurement doesn't matter. It's a game of it's a game of very fine margins, and when you have somebody that you can trust to make the right decision in a very brief period of time, That is absolutely key. The only problem, again, and this is something that we have seen a couple of times, is the pace is a little lacking for me. 8 pace currently, 5 acceleration. Out on the wing, pace is so important, and if you don't have pace that is at least of a reasonable level, you do risk getting left behind and not being able to beat defenders. And when your game relies on snap judgments, snap decisions, that could be a bit of a hindrance. But again, plenty of time to remedy that, plenty of time to invest in that side of the game.
We also see in the statistics here. We mentioned earlier that an average rating of about 7 is tends to be or tends to describe a very good player, and the Victoria has had an average rating of 7.01 in their 10 appearances, but they haven't scored that many goals. They haven't had that many assists. So this seems to indicate that Victoria's play has been very good on the statistics that you don't necessarily see. Maybe making runs in the correct position, making those passes. I mean, 8 chances created is relatively high, but maybe the rating comes in more along the lines of those first passes to central midfielder that then pushes it on to a striker in a goal scoring position. So this seems to indicate
Exactly.
that Victoria is a vital part, or was a vital part, in Stockholm's play, even though that the statistics that you usually see, that you usually focus on, might not show it as much.
Exactly. And again, even if you're not scoring goals, even if you're not getting assists on the board, you can still contribute so effectively by making those runs, like you said, by getting into those positions where you can turn the tide to your advantage and ping the ball into somebody who can make that last pass and make good on those advantages. So even if you're not recruiting on those stats, it's still more than possible to be a positive influence on your team. And I think look no further than Victoria on that. I think destined to be a very unsung hero of that Sao Paulo team should their fortunes improve.
Moving right on to Tokyo's second pick in this draft at 14th overall. We have no trade to announce this time, thankfully, so we can just go directly to the pick. And Tokyo selects from Atletico Medellin the central defensive midfielder Anthony Lee, the user Ant-Man.
Well, once again, a central defensive midfielder. I have nothing but praise for players in that position in the SSL. Certainly very well built mentally, as far as I can tell. The anticipation of 13, important in a defensive role, 13 concentration and teamwork and positioning and work rate. So very much focused on that mental game. Very good, very strong game sense in general. And being able to dictate the flow of the match, uh, that's going to be a very important pick for Tokyo in the seasons to come. Being able to have somebody who can anchor that midfield and sort of dictate the tempo, who can serve as your midfield engine. Could be faster though. Again, with a pace of 6 and acceleration of 7. Again, the further back you go, it's not quite as important, but it does help to have it a little higher than where they're at right now. And technically speaking, there is a little bit of room for growth. Their highest attributes, I keep calling them stats, I shouldn't. Besides passing and tackling, their highest attribute is first touch, which is 10, which is reasonable, but after that, it is a bit of a drop off over time. So certainly has the mental has the bright mentality, just needs to work on a little bit more of the technical side of their game. But ultimately, again, I think has a lot of potential to solidify that midfield for Tokyo.
And once again, we see a player with a relatively high average rating, with the stats doesn't necessarily show it. So definitely someone who is present in all of the right places Uh, in that doesn't necessarily show in the most popular statistics.
And I think part of that might be due to that second trait that we haven't mentioned yet, tries long range passes. So they're going to be trying to find these find these windows of opportunity from a long way out, and that can sometimes really unlock a defense. That can really get a move going. And when they can dictate the tempo and they can sort of they effectively make the other team play the game on their terms, and that is so valuable for a midfielder. So I think ultimately going to be very interesting to see how this player develops. Again, could use a little more technical education, could use a bit more speed, but mentally and just in general, I think a strong pick at this point in the draft.
I mentioned earlier that this pick was not involved with any trades, but yeah, we had a trade. Sao Paulo, or no, it was Hollywood's trade that sent 14 and 16 back to Tokyo. So we already presented that, at least.
Indeed.
But now we have yet another trade for 15 overall. So 15th overall has been traded twice in this draft and once before the draft. And it's the same teams that are involved in this trade as well. We have Reykjavik and União Sao Paulo trading 15 overall back and forth. Reykjavik sends their 15th overall selection in this draft, their second rounder, alongside a second rounder in next season's draft to União Sao Paulo for goalkeeper Steven Urkel, the user Zoot.
Well, I'll be honest, this is a trade that on its face very much confuses me. Steven Urkel was only drafted, I believe, in season 14, if I'm not mistaken. So, just coming up to the end of his rookie contract with União Sao Paulo, I suppose they weren't able to get an extension done or whatever the case may be. I don't want to speculate, but Reykjavik also does have a fairly young goalkeeper of their own in Brickwall Jr., so on its face, it's a little bit of a confusing trade for both teams. Ultimately, Unio does get that pick, and clearly they needed it, but I don't know. I have to be honest, this one is a bit of a head scratcher for me.
I think Reykjavik has always had two very strong goalkeepers, so maybe they wanted to keep that tradition going with Urkel coming in, with Scott Sterling recently retiring as the goalkeeper for Reykjavik and last season North Shore, who won the SSL Cup and the minor league, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so Urkel coming into an organization that has a good history with having good goalkeepers and multiple of them essentially, and União Sao Paulo getting a pick out or two picks rather back in return, and with their 15th overall selection, or with the 15th overall selection, União Sao Paulo selects from Stockholm's Idrottsklubb the striker Eric Belmont, the user Belmont.
So this is a very interesting pick for me. This is one of three players that going into the draft was listed as inactive. However, we have seen user Belmont in the Discord, so I'm not entirely sure why they're classed as inactive. Nevertheless, if they do become active again, this could be a very interesting pick here for Sao Paulo. Uh, we saw earlier uh, we saw earlier an attacking midfielder that played more of a shadow striker. In this case, I think we might have a striker that's really more of a false nine, sort of the opposite of that. Only 10 finishing, but does have 15 teamwork, 13 vision, and 15 decisions. So might look more as a sort of a facilitator at the top of the line. Uh, Brain of a midfielder in the body of a striker, and if they do come back, as you can see there by the academy statistics, 9 assists to 1 goal, which is not the sort of return you would expect from a striker, but still very interesting tactically. If if Belmont it can become active again on the forum and get some TPE into this player, this could be a very unique tactical choice here by Sao Paulo.
Belmont paired up with, let's see if I'm getting it right, Sterling Scott. Yeah, that's the other way. Sterling Scott, the fifth overall pick in this draft, the striker who got 20 goals in the academy. So I believe Belmont and Scott made a great pairing, like you said. Belmont being more of a distributor, going maybe a bit further back in the pitch to get the ball, and distributing up to a rushing Scott to who has those places, shots, traits, and so on. So uh, if Sao Paulo could get that tandem going in either Paris and later on Sao Paulo, this could be a very successful pick at 15th overall.
And there is a bit of a mark against this player because they are inactive, but even so, like this is even so, this could still very much come good if Belmont does does become active again. Certainly not a given, obviously, but with a little bit more investment, this could be very a very interesting setup, especially since I believe no, never mind, I'm mistaken, I was thinking of something else entirely. But nevertheless, I think s I say the word interesting a lot, but it really is an intriguing, unusual pick, and I really hope Belmont does come back to the forum and become active again, because I really want to see how they do in that Sao Paulo attack.
Well, like you mentioned, they were active, or they are active rather, on Discord. So maybe it's just a push in the right direction that they need to get back to activity and start earning. Training camp is 40 TPE. We get a new training camp in a couple of weeks, starting with the portal. Um, Maybe a bit of a spoiler, but we might see the portal very soon, launching officially. So Belmont has some very good opportunities to start earning back up again. With that being said, we move on to pick 16 overall, which is Tokyo again, acquired in the earlier trade with Hollywood. And let's see if I'm doing this correctly. Let's move here. So this is the last pick of the second round. And with 16 overall, Tokyo selects from Atletico Medellin, Puma Super Hoops, the user KDR.
Well, Tokyo getting very good value out of this trade that where they sent the 12th overall pick to Hollywood in exchange for the 14 and the 16. Whenever you're able to turn one player into two, that is just good business unambiguously. Super Hoops does fill a fairly solid need on the right wing uh, in defense. So certainly going to be interesting to see what their role is going forward. 13 acceleration and pace is a good start. They've also got a 12 work rate, which is very important, as I've said, when you're on the wing, whether attacking or defending. There's a lot of running, a lot of stops and starts. If you're on the wing, you need to be on it from the moment the whistle blows. So being able to start out with that is certainly a plus. We'll be looking to line up with those central attackers. They've got Skyrise in the middle at least for a few more seasons. They've also got I don't believe they posted their extensions yet, but they might still have Franco Torres for next season as well. So very much plenty of targets there in the center for Tokyo. And they've also got 104 TPE still to commit. So they haven't actually added anything from their initial build. So go perhaps waiting to see where they ended up, what their needs would be. But ultimately a lot of potential here.
And we also see from the Academy statistics that the user or the player was created relatively late in the season, with only 3 appearances out of the total of 15, and still only being I guess 70 TP, 60 TP from the TP class leader, like we mentioned earlier. And that's not a lot of TP in the grand scheme of things. So if you're thinking about creating late and maybe feel a bit left behind, you don't need to feel left behind. I mean, you can still perform really well in this league with maybe 50 or 60 TP lower than the class leader in terms of how much impact your build can have at different TPE levels.
And I can actually personally testify to that as somebody who created about halfway through the academy season when I made my player. So it really is. Certainly, there is a bit of a disadvantage, but there is some TP you miss out on. But with a little bit of stick to itiveness, a little bit of tenacity, it ultimately you can easily close that gap. So if you want the bottom line is whenever you feel like creating, don't feel like you have to wait. Just jump in. We'd be glad to have you.
And with that, we move on to the first pick of the third round, which sees Buenos Aires making their third selection in this draft. And we have from, let's see if I'm pushing the buttons correctly again, from Victoria Falls Eagles, Buenos Aires selects Nicholas Corrigan, the user Scottish Eyebrow.
Well, Nicholas Corrigan is another one of those players that is pretty well rounded, fairly competent in most regards. Certainly nothing specifically standing out. First touch of 12 is higher than average for a new draftee for sure. A lot of stats, though, a lot of attributes, excuse me, are at 11 or 10, which is fairly helpful in terms of building for the future. Already a very high floor this player has. So certainly can build into whatever is necessary and be very fairly good at it. Uh, a little bit lacking in the technical department, despite besides the first touch. And I again could do a little bit more investment in speed. 11 pace and acceleration is all right, but I would like to see it a little bit higher. But again, fairly well rounded all around. Can't really complain. So certainly going to be very important to see how they develop.
And we've seen in Buenos Aires the long time central attacking midfielder Aimotelli recently retiring. So this is definitely someone or Corrigan is definitely someone that is slotted in to um, maybe take over the future or be the future of the team in that regard. Um, yeah.
Certainly some big shoes to fill, but I think as long as this player remains focused on the goal, I think it's well within Corrigan's reach here. We see there on the academy contributions another player that joined partway through with an average rating of 6.75, but still contributed 2 goals. So, despite being perhaps a little bit more on the passing side, does have that finishing capability. And running with the ball often, they are making those runs through the center. So, certainly going to be very important in progressing the ball for Buenos Aires and setting up those attackers uh, for f- for eventually being able to finish them off. And they did remember draft Sterling Scott a little bit earlier, so Scott now has somebody to feed them the ball through the middle, and that when those two can really find a connection, Buenos Aires is going to be a very exciting place to watch soccer in the coming seasons.
Or at least Athena now in the close future.
Well, certainly Athens in the next season or two, and then eventually, all going well, Buenos Aires after that.
Yes. We have 18 overall, our final trade to announce in this draft. We have Hollywood acquiring. No, sorry. Yes, I was correct. Yeah. Hollywood acquiring the 18th overall from Catalonia in exchange for a third round pick in next season's draft. So Hollywood trading into this draft for next season's third.
Well, whenever you swap third round picks in the SSL, it can always be a little bit dicey. Traditionally, our classes don't seem to be don't aren't always that deep. Certainly this season is a bit of an exception. We're still seeing quality players coming off the board this late. So ultimately, ultimately, Catalonia taking a bit of a gamble that there's going to be a lot of players available. Although, considering I believe as of this morning there were 10 or 11 players already in the pool for next season, I think it ends up being a fairly strong gamble that they'll get at least somebody worth developing. But otherwise, Hollywood getting back into the draft again at 18.
And with the 18th overall selection, Hollywood selects from Stockholm's Idrottsklubb Devin Wagner, the user Gage 2.
Well, this is a very agile player right off the bat. You see 17 there is extremely high for a player just starting out. And pairing that with 15 passing means that they're going to be getting into spaces where they can distribute the ball to the players that can really finish that off. That said, with 14 acceleration comes a pace attribute of 5. So it's a low top speed, but they do get there quickly. So ultimately, they are going to probably want to invest in pace if they can, just to sort of make that acceleration really matter. But other than that, as far as I can tell, they do have fairly high flair and passing and vision as well. Uh, all of those at 14, or excuse me, flair and vision at 14, passing at 15. And not only that, but you see that trait tries killer balls often. This is going to be a player that pulls exciting, really dangerous passes pretty much out of nowhere. And that is going to really turn the tide in Hollywood in Capstad's favor as long as they can get those passes on target. So, going to be very exciting to see how they can shift momentum in that way, finding those killer balls into the attacking third.
And we've seen in the academy during the 15 appearances Wagner has made that, I mean, they've contributed offensively very well with 4 goals and 6 assists with 16 chances created alongside 32 defensive actions. And the defensive actions include 1 headers, clearances, interceptions, and tackles, if I'm not misremembering. So Wagner has been a bit all over the place on the pitch and essentially succeeding in a lot of the things that they've set out to do with an average rating of 7.13.
Wagner is going to be a very fun player to watch develop. Hollywood with a lot of extremely exciting players. A couple of seasons ago, drafting Cameron Bailey, who I think they had 20 flair, or at least very high flair to start with. So I do like me a player that has good flair. Let's be honest. But yeah, I think this Hollywood attack is going to be very exciting to watch, and Wagner is just another piece in that puzzle for sure. So yeah, nothing to complain about this pick. I like it.
And we have a couple of picks left in this draft. We have let's see here. We have where are we? I can't see the board. 16th, no, 19th overall. Is that where we
Yes.
are right now? Yes. Um. So at 19th overall, we have that União Sao Paulo. Yes, it is União Sao Paulo coming back in with their, I believe, fifth selection. Fifth selection in this draft. So essentially drafting half a team in this draft class. And they have selected from Stockholm's Idrottsklubb Jan van Dorn, the user Nathan8.
Well, this is another one of those players that was a late addition to the draft class, but certainly very eye-catching attributes to start with. I do want to. The thing I want to remark most about is that trait plays 1-2s. For those who aren't familiar, a 1-2 is essentially when player A makes a pass to another player who then immediately passes back to that same player who is in a different position. So this is really important for unlocking defenses, and to have a player that can really do well with that. They have the acceleration of 15 and the passing of 15 to make that really work. Those bursts of speed, getting into the awkward positions for the defense. Going to be very exciting to watch them work on that right wing. They're also fairly strong in defense as well, with 15 marking. Certainly an important trait for any defender to have. Uh, but there are a few areas that might let this player down, most notably work rate 9. I keep mentioning how important that work rate is. There's also a bit of a lack of defensive positioning, only a 7 in that regard, and decisions and anticipation are also fairly low. So a lot of room to grow in the mental game, but technically speaking, I think once they can sort that out, being able to unlock defenses with those 1-2s is going to be so crucial for Sao Paulo.
And you also here have a player that on paper, or at least on the screen here, they have only their 350 TPE claimed, or at least used from when they created. And since they created relatively late, they both have catch up TPE, they have training camp. So you essentially have 90 to 100 TPE you can just apply directly or claim directly via the forum. So definitely something to look out for the user Nathan here, um, to get those essentially free TPE as a late create, uh, to
And one
improve those aspects of their build.
and once again, just because a player is a late create doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be able to reach the same heights as their draft classmates because again, as somebody who's been there, uh, ultimately, what matters is your willingness to improve and stick with your basically ability to stick with it. And if you have that, then you can gain as much TPE as you need and then some. So I think as long as Van Dorn can remain disciplined, can stick to that regimen, the sky's the limit, quite frankly.
It certainly is. And we do have pick number 20 coming up. We have Tokyo coming sorry, coming back into sorry. Think I swallowed something wrong in the wrong. Fel strupe, as you say in Swedish. I don't know what you call that in English. 20th overall, sorry. Tokyo coming back into the draft. And at 20 overall, they select from Stockholm's Idrottsklubb Zeki Alturkis, the user Clay Abbey.
Well, this certainly is an interesting case. As you've no doubt instantly spotted, this player has a technique of 20. The only problem is that such a heavy investment in this one attribute comes at the detriment of every other attribute, as their next highest, as you can see, is a 10. 10 in anticipation and off the ball, as well as positioning and teamwork and work rate. So while they do have good technique, the problem is that there's not much else to back it up at the moment. Certainly, a lot of TB left to be claimed, or again, there is the for all of our rookies this season, there is the option to redistribute either you have basically 2 options. You can redistribute 100 TPE from your build and use it somewhere else, or you can even just completely re-roll within your first few seasons. So I'm not suggesting that here necessarily. I am saying though that there will be a lot of investment required to get these attributes a little bit up closer to baseline. But that said, having such a high technique isn't a bad thing at all. And certainly once those attributes do catch up, they're going to have a they're going to have a b- very strong baseline to work from.
Sorry, I was out getting some water, trying to get the thing out of my throat. Um, where were we? Pix 20.
I was remarking that the technique being 20, while it comes at the detriment of pretty much every other attribute, it in itself is not a bad thing. And once the other attributes do eventually catch up through uh, TPE and training, having that technique high will provide a little bit of an extra added baseline to work from.
Yes, yes, that is completely true. And like we mentioned for Van Dorn earlier in the pick earlier, uh, having just 350 TP on paper or on the screen right now means that they have a lot of TP available to claim directly with catch up TP and training camp from last season. Important to note there about the training camp. Today is the last day to claim that, as the thread will close tomorrow when we start the new season. So make sure that you've put your name in that thread to claim those TPE for season 15. We have our first pass. A pass is essentially a team or organization that has decided that we don't want to make another pick, and instead of making use of that pick, they've forfeited it. They passed, and they cannot make any more picks in the draft. So at 21 overall, we have the first pass, which means that AC Romana making their first pick in this draft at 22 overall, coming in now. So with the 22nd overall selection, we have from Atletico Medellin, Romana picking Tom Edwards, the right attacking midfielder, the user Tom Edwards.
Well, this has the potential to be a sneaky good pick. Romana certainly waited for it, having not made a single pick in the first or second rounds, which is a little bit of a surprise. But based on, I believe they traded away a good number of their picks in this draft over the last season, and I believe in the previous draft. But nevertheless, they do get one player here, and this is certainly a fairly decent pick, I would say. Edwards is a fairly decent shooter. Can cut inside and shoot with serious power, as you can tell. Uh, as we see there, the finishing of 13 being the headliner there. 12 pace is also very good, and being able to contribute from crosses is absolutely helpful on the wing as well. The other notable thing is, well, as I mentioned, cutting inside from both wings, so could potentially function more as an inside forward, being able to move into more central positions there. Uh, they are right-footed, so they are most at home on that right wing, but I would not be surprised to see them deployed potentially a little bit on that left wing, and again, cutting inside and shooting on that right foot. So ultimately, I think is a player with a fairly strong baseline to work from. Uh, Always a potential goal threat. The mental aspect will need a little bit of investment, a little bit of work, but overall, I think this is a pretty solid start for Tom Edwards. Best of luck in Rome. Well, I will say, Candidace, if you're saying anything, I unfortunately can't hear you at the moment.
Oh, I should probably unmute my mic. Yes, so we have a bunch of passes. What did I say more? The next pick is at pick 28. And at pick 28, Tokyo selects Mario Presenti from Victoria Falls Eagles. There we go.
Well, this is the second inactive player off the board. To be honest, I wouldn't expect a ton of growth from this player as they haven't been active. Just really checking, just quickly checking. Well, I take it back. They were active on the 4th of July last, but hasn't really updated in quite a while last I checked. So unless they do come back, I'm not sure how much room for growth there will be here. Still, though, as it stands, not it does have some TPE left to spend, and has a decent amount of flair and passing sense. So could still be fairly effective if the user does come back. But whether that happens or not is very much up in the air.
And with the final selection of this season's draft, I noticed that the draft board isn't updating correctly, but nonetheless, we will go right to pick number 31. We have União Sao Paulo making the first, and well, they started the draft, and it's just um, not customary. What do you say? Um, uh, my brain is a bit fried right now. Sell? No. What word am I looking for? Metafiction.
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure, but
It's
they and
poetic that they end the draft. Is that the word I'm
you
looking
know
for?
what? Yeah, that is
Yeah.
actually a pretty good way to put it.
Uh,
They start the draft and they end it.
yes, exactly. And they select with pick 31 from Victoria Falls Eagles, Mant Craig, the user absolutely nothing.
Well, I would make a joke about the username, but I think that's a little bit out of pocket, so I won't do that. This is the third and final inactive player, and it is fairly rare that a class has only three inactives. So the fact that so many players are active, it really is a testament to how strong this class is. As for Craig, though, this is clearly meant to be a goal scoring uh, winger sort of player. We see as evidenced by places shots being able to try and put the ball in the places where the goalkeepers can't reach, but also trying killer balls often means that they're hoping to be able to facilitate as well, which is always welcome in the attacking third. They've got a solid technical base, a lot of attributes in at 10 or 11 in addition to the 13 finishing. They're they will need if they do return, they will need a little bit of investment in the mental game if they really want to shine. Also, again, as I've said a lot of times, uh, they are at 10 pace and 10 acceleration, so I would like to see those come up a little bit more if they come back. But they do have about 74 TPE left to spend, so ultimately if they do come back, there is plenty of chance to build on what they've got.
And with that, we have concluded the S16 Prospect Draft. I've tried to fix the round 4 summary here, but I couldn't get it to work. But at pick 28, we had Mario Presunti being picked by Tokyo Sporting or Sports Club, and at pick 31, we just recently announced we had Mant Craig going to União Sao Paulo. The other picks you see on the screen right now. Um, and to just finish off the live stream, is there anything specific that you want to touch back on, Metafiction?
Well, I do want to point out a couple of interesting trends that I noticed. I think Buenos Aires got a fairly good haul here. They picked up Sterling Scott, who, with 20 goals in the academy, an absolutely lethal weapon in front of goal if they can get into those positions. And then going into the third round, picking up Nicholas Corrigan to pair with Scott, I think that tandem is going to be, again, a very, very dangerous pairing. in the season to come if they both continue to develop. Also, Sao Paulo picking up a lot of players in this draft, as well as Tokyo, who did need a bit of a refresh with their aging team, uh, coming up with a lot of players coming up to retirement potentially, uh, and having to go through regression. I think most of the teams in this draft are going to be fairly happy with their performance in this draft, and I think a lot of these players, as I've said, have potential to be very strong contributions to the league, both minor and major. So I think overall this might be an all-timer as far as drafts go.
And I think with that, we've been with you now for about 2 hours. We'll bid farewell. A lot of exciting prospects, or a lot of exciting things to look forward to in this season. We have a bunch of new prospects joining in the both major and minor leagues, and we have a portal coming up, and as well we have a new draft class working their way through the SSL Academy, readying themselves for S17 draft, prospect draft in about 9 weeks or so. So a lot of things, exciting things to look forward to.
Truly are exciting times here in the SSL as always. Unless I'm mistaken, I believe that does it for us here. Until next time, we'll see you Friday the 20. Well, before that, we've also got preseason coming up in a couple of weeks, the 23rd and 24th, and then after that, the SSL Shield on Friday, July the 26th, and then the next day, the league play kicks off for season 16 of the SSL. We'll be excited to see you there. Until next time, this has been Metafiction with Candidates. Thank you for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.